from, this angle. Up here. If you don't know me, I'm Joe. I'm not usually up here, so you came on a good morning. Here at Delco, we believe that Jesus is continuing to teach us through God's Word how we ought to obey His commandments and make disciples, right? Ultimately, we think that Jesus is showing us how to slowly become more and more like Him through the stories that were divinely written by His followers, that were inspired by, influenced by, spoken by the mouth of the Lord. The stories that we have in our Bibles, right? We're going to read one of those today. Sorry, you have to excuse my voice. I went to a crew game last night, and I was yelling a lot with Emma. That's my wife, Emma, right there, if you don't know her. So, we're actually picking up in a series that we were doing a little while ago. I got sick, and I wasn't able to preach, so we did an impromptu morning. But I'm going to read an excerpt from the Bible that we skipped. And you guys, you don't have to read along. You can just listen. It says, after the 2 days, he left for Galilee. Now, Jesus himself had pointed out that a prophet has no honor in his own country. When he arrived in Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him. They had seen all that he had done in Jerusalem at the Passover festival, for they also had been there. Once more he visited Cana in Galilee, where he had turned the water into wine. You guys remember that from that wedding. And there was a certain royal official whose son lay sick in Capernaum. When this man heard that Jesus had arrived in Galilee from Judea, he went to him and begged him to come and heal his son, who was close to death. Unless you people see signs and wonders, Jesus told him, you will never believe. The royal official said, Sir, come down before my child dies. Go, Jesus replied. Your son will live. The man took Jesus at his word and departed. While he was still on his way, his servants met him with the news that his boy was living. When he inquired as to the time when his son got better, they said to him, Yesterday, at 1 p.m, the fever left him. That's when the father realized that this was the exact time at which Jesus had said to him, Your son will live. So he and his whole household believed. This was the second sign Jesus performed after coming from Judea to Galilee. So we've got faithfulness, steadfastness, loyalty. All right? Faithful, steadfast, loyal. We are called to be faithful, and we are called to be like Jesus. God is faithful to his people, and so therefore Jesus is faithful to his people. He shows us what it means and how we ought to be faithful. He models that for us. Jesus was faithful to the man who accepted him regardless of Jesus' standing on this earth, right? Regardless, and Jesus is faithful to him regardless of this man's sins. You can call him an official or a centurion. The Bible uses both words to describe who this guy is. And he believed that Jesus was who he said he was, right? Faithfully. And Jesus pushes past the physical bounds of the world, right? He bashes through the logical pillars that space and time stand on for people and how they understand it. And from miles away, he heals this Roman soldier's son because the Roman soldier believed. That's how he operated back then. And so, kind of a weird story to try to pull context out of, because we're not Roman soldiers, we don't live back then. Jesus isn't physically, he's not in the room and we can see him and we're asking him to heal something, right? It requires even more faith from us because he's here, we just can't physically see him, right? And so, if we were reading like a passage, I don't know, if I was like reading from the Sermon on the Mount or something, and it was, do not hate or do not murder, then it'd be easy. I could say, hey guys, don't murder. And then we would eat, and we'd all be home by 11 o'clock, right? So I thought about it, and if we're going to apply this to our lives today, I felt like I should share a personal story with you guys that I think relates really well to the story. I have a tendency to be a little bit long-winded, if you guys have heard me preach before. So I'm going to try to get through it fast and not have you guys here forever. If you're new, then you won't know this about Delco, but if you've been around Delco and Delco's people for a while, you've probably heard about this thing called soul care. Have you guys heard about that? Or heard us like geek out about it, talk about it? We really like it. So you're probably familiar with how willing most of us are to acknowledge that spiritual evil and spiritual warfare is a reality, and it's something that we deal with as followers of Jesus. And so I'm going to share with you a story of when I think I was in the midst of one of the strongest blows I've ever received while dealing with spiritual warfare. It was in the middle of the night, right after the last night at our Soul Care Conference. The Soul Care Conference was great. I had spent the whole weekend doing really good work with the Lord, and just learning a lot of things about myself and about my family and about my relationships. It was great. That was a Saturday night. I was going to go to bed, get up, come to church in the morning, be excited. You know, I was in a very good spot. I was feeling really good, really strong. And it seems like most of the stories that I've heard about spiritual warfare is the attacks usually come when you're like doing really, really good, right? Like, evil hates that. You're doing good, right? And so I think that I was at a really high point, which kind of put a target on my back, it felt like. My wife, Emma, that I introduced you guys to, her and I, we went to bed. Everything felt really normal. Emma, we dated for 5 years, so she already knows so many things about me, and she knows that I put up with this thing, this phenomenon called sleep paralysis. Has anybody heard of that before? Who doesn't know what that is? Scientifically, what's happening in most cases is your brain wakes up before your body does. So you can be sleeping and then you become conscious before you actually wake up. And so when you go to sleep, your body goes into a state of paralysis, which is a good thing for you. Otherwise, you'd start acting out your dreams and you might do something bad. That design actually keeps you from acting out during your normal sleep cycles, right? That's the way that the Lord designed us, was to be safe while sleeping. The problem is when you come out of a deep sleep and begin to regain consciousness, but your body stays in that paralysis. And because you're half conscious, half unconscious, it's not uncommon for people to see things or like feel like they're hallucinating, or because they're like still kind of dreaming, right? And like small things can happen. Your fingers can like kind of flick if you're trying to wake yourself up. You might open your eyes, which might freak out your partner. But overall, you can't move. And this can and has often, and most of my cases, be like a really terrifying thing to have happen. Just seeing the worst things imaginable, you know, in your bedroom. You can't get away from it. So that was something that I already knew that I put up with. And right before we left Soul Care Conference, they hit us with a warning. Hey, we have always gotten reports back that after the Soul Care Conference, people just encounter sleep paralysis as like a spiritual attack. And I was like, oh, great. I'm for sure going to have that then. And I did. So this night, it was probably the worst experience I've ever had with sleep paralysis. I was asleep, I was dreaming, right? I still got Soul Care on my mind. I remember we were standing in this kitchen, and I was with everybody that I'd gone through Soul Care with, and we're debriefing and laughing and enjoying ourselves, just talking about how awesome it was to see the Lord move. And for some reason, I look down at a counter in front of me, and when I try to look up, I can't. I'm just frozen looking down, and I like feel totally different. And this fear sets in. I started to panic because I knew what this was. I've put up with it before, and then I heard a voice that brought me a lot of comfort in that moment. But what it said to me really freaked me out. And the voice was actually, you all know him, Jordan McCain. I heard Jordan talk to me in my sleep, which sounds crazy, right? I probably was just dreaming that Jordan was saying something to me. And I tried desperately to crank my head up and like look at Jordan as he was talking to me, but I couldn't, and so I just gave up and just like listened to what he was saying. What he said was, it's creepy, so brace yourself. He said, there's somebody in your bathroom. We have a bathroom connected to our bedroom. I'm on the side of the bed that's closest to the bathroom. They're looking at you. They're not supposed to be there. Jesus does not want them there. We are going to get them out. That's what I heard Jordan's voice say to me in my sleep. Nope, I don't like it. I can't. That freaks me out. I stayed paralyzed, just staring at the details of like this countertop that I imagined up in my sleep. And then, as I usually do in a state of sleep paralysis, I started to, and this is not uncommon for most stories that I've heard about it, you start to struggle to get air because you're still paralyzed, you can't breathe as well, especially if you like rolled over in your pillow, it's like really bad for you. And it kind of like starts to burn and you like start to overthink. Like if I told you guys, like, you're blinking right now, or you're taking breaths right now, sorry that I said it, but like you start to overthink and you think about every time you take a breath, or you think about every time that you blink, and you start to overthink it and it gets difficult. Well, that's even worse than sleep paralysis. This continued until what normally happens is you just like kind of jolt awake, but instead like when it's happening really bad, you wake and like gasp for air at the same time. So I shoot off my pillow, I gasp for air. It's a noise. The noise I make should have been plenty loud enough to wake Emma up, right? That should have startled her and woken her up, but she did not get up. She stayed asleep with her back towards me. So I took a moment to myself, just like debriefing, like, okay, it's fine. That was just a little bit spooky, but no big deal. And then decided that I needed to wake Emma up and debrief with her so that she could just tell me, like, I'm actually okay and I'm fine, I could go back to sleep. I just needed that. So I said her name, no response. I said it again, nothing. Remember, her back's to me, so I reach over and grab her arm and I was like, Emma, wake up, Emma. Hey, I need your help for a second. And there's no movement whatsoever. So I freak out again, I'm like, still panicked, still like kind of disoriented from everything. So I grabbed her shoulder and like rolled her over to me. And it made sense to me as to why she was not responding, because Emma was not the other person that was in my bed. I will spare you the details of what I was encountering, but when I rolled her over, it was not my wife that was, staring and smiling back at me. And I must have screamed so loud enough to make some actual noise in real life, because that's when I was shaken awake for real this time by my actual wife, which was very relieving, but I was still very upset by everything that had been going on. I'm going to leave us right there. We'll put a bookmark on that, all right? I'm actually going to ask you guys a series of questions. Actually, let's do this. Raise your hand if you're comfortable with me singling you out and asking you a couple questions. I'm going to do it, Alex. Is that okay? Have you ever encountered a miracle?
Yes.
How old were you the first time?
I can't remember. Was it 7 or 9?
Okay. How old were you when you first learned about Jesus?
Maybe.
And then on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you really truly believe that miracles were possible before you had ever seen one? You were fully possible? I shouldn't have asked you. You're too faithful. I feel like I know the answer to this question for you. How likely are you to believe that another one can happen now that you've experienced one? Yeah. And that's usually, if I'm going to be transparent with you guys, I probably did not, I didn't become a Christian until I was 18, so that probably has some effect on it. But on a scale of 1 to 10, my number was pretty low before I had ever witnessed a miracle. Of like, I'm not sure if those are real, maybe that's just a Bible thing, and we read about them. But then once I finally experienced one, I just expect them to keep coming, right? So once you've experienced and been in the midst of the miraculous work of Jesus, first off, you're like, well, that is awesome and that is great. I want more of that. And then it just keeps coming and you believe it more and more. So the story we read, right, it says that this man took Jesus at his word, right? It says he took Jesus at his word and he walked home, which makes me ask myself, how often am I willing to take Jesus at his word? We know the man made a good call by doing so, right? Because halfway home, he was met by his servants who were coming from where he lived to tell him, hey, we just experienced, I don't know if they would have called it a miracle, but we just experienced a miracle at home. Your son, who has been terribly sick, the fever left him, right? This royal official that we're talking about here, whose son Jesus healed, most likely he was either a Roman official or an official who was subject to Herod, right? But either way, he would not have, at least by nature of his position, either under Herod or under Rome, been super inclined to see Jesus as the coming Messiah, right? That's not something that, due to his demographic, he would have been super on board with. And same thing with the stance of the servants of his house, right? I wouldn't be shocked if they also weren't very inclined to see Jesus as the coming Messiah. It's even possible that the people back at his home hadn't even heard stories about him yet, because Jesus is still on earth doing his ministry, and who knows who had heard of him or witnessed him at this point, if these servants had or not. But regardless, they still witnessed a miraculous thing happen. I want to pose a question. Can you think of anybody you know who doesn't know Jesus yet? Kind of spitballing off of Jordan last week. Didn't need to. If you can, and if Jesus still operates the same way today, then they probably could. And they could probably witness something pretty amazing, even if they don't know who Jesus is yet. And I think we'd be right in praying that those people encounter miracles in an amazing way that would turn them towards Christ, right? Because apparently, if what we just read is true, he can do it from a great distance away. The people who experience a miracle from Christ do not have to be in the same physical place with him. Not in this story, right? So the day after I experienced that spiritual warfare in the form of sleep paralysis, Emma and I went back to sleep after a little while. And then when I got up, it was a normal day. We came to church. And we were all met with the question, because Jordan had gone to the conference with us. We all come to church, feeling fresh. We should have. I felt kind of tired. And Jordan says, "How do you guys sleep?" Not good. I said, I had a really bad night. And I told Jordan the whole story that I just shared with you guys. But I had a horrible night of sleep paralysis and woke up next to something that was not my wife before waking up for real. I was in the kitchen having a good time, and then I became paralyzed and heard your voice actually tell me that there was an entity that was watching me from my bathroom and that Jesus didn't want him there. Really spooky. Jordan is somebody who has had a lot of experience with spiritual warfare on behalf of other people, and he's seen some things. So what I shared with him, I expected to shock him, but really gave him no surprise. And he just calmly responded, "Oh, you must have been the one that I was praying for last night then. I should mention this. I know the exact time I woke up because I went back through and looked through all the texts that I sent. I sent out a few texts to ask people for prayer because I was just so uncomfortable and like really just needed some encouragement and backup. My first text went out at 3:08, which means at 3 o'clock I was for sure asleep, then woke up around 3:08 and sent my first text. Jordan told me his story about how his night had gone, and he had woken up in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock exactly with the instruction from the Lord to pray. He didn't know who it was for, but he knew that something was attacking one of his own, and that the Lord got him up to start praying for them. And if I'm not mistaken, Hope got up too when she prayed, and they prayed together for whoever it was. Like I said, 3 o'clock would have been when I was dreaming, and most likely the moment that I heard Jordan's voice speak in my dream. That means that the Lord said to Jordan that there was something to pray against, and in my dream, the Lord used Jordan to tell me what it was, and ultimately said to me, like, stay calm. You're going to be okay. I've got people on this. People are working. There's a reason that we do church as a community. That's how it's designed. So, faithfulness, steadfastness, loyalty. We're called to be faithful. We're called to be like Jesus. God's faithful to his people. Jesus is faithful to his people. Jesus was faithful to the man who accepted him regardless of his standing on earth, regardless of his sin. The centurion believed Jesus was who he said he was, and faithfully Jesus pushes past the physical bounds of the earth and heals his son from miles away, of the Roman soldier believer, right? Because that's how he operated back then. But Jesus is faithful today to the mother believer, the church planting believers, the teacher believers, the barista believers. He's faithful in the first year of marriage, and he's faithful beyond the 10th. Sorry, my voice is failing out on me. He pushes past the physical boundaries of the earth and from miles away, or from an encompassing embrace. He is omniscient, after all. He heals us, comforts us, and loves us, because that's how he operates today. I know that was kind of a quick one today, but I think it'd be really neat, and I feel like we should facilitate a time that's a little bit of a change of a pace, but to do some faith building. What I mean by that is encouraging one another with the stories that the Lord has, and the ways that we've encountered the Lord, things he's done in our life, what we've witnessed, right? So what I'm going to invite you guys into is, from any point in your life, pick a moment that you know was a miracle or an intervention from the Lord, and tell that story to the people at your tables, right? So a moment that you believe that you've witnessed a miracle. I want us to hear about it from each other and share it and tell each other the amazing things that we've encountered. And if you're pretty sure that you've never witnessed one before, then I don't think it would be a bad move to share maybe a hardship that you faithfully are praying to see a miracle in. I don't know who has music, but we're going to turn some music on in the background, and let's give it like 20 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, since we had a kind of shorter sermon today. Let's say 25 minutes, and then Jordan will come up and wrap us up together and give us some announcements before we eat. Sound good? I'm going to pray before we get into it. Lord, I just pray that as we read a story of yours, the miraculous healing work of Jesus, that we would first and foremost sit in awe and wonder of you, But I pray, Lord, that the stories like this that build our faith would infiltrate our hearts and our lives and actually result in change for us. So God, I pray that you would just, I pray for blessing on us as we think about the moments in our lives that we've witnessed your miraculous work and share with each other. And I pray that you move. In Jesus' name, amen. We can go ahead and get started.